you there. Very briefly, Heather's going to explain the background as to why this particular piece of work and this seminar have come out of some work in Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, but welcome to guests in the further north in the Bristol area. And then we're going to have two short presentations, one from Jo Curtis, who will introduce herself, who works for South Devon and Torbay CCG. A little gap for about 10 minutes for questions and answers, particularly on what Jo's been saying. And then we're going to hear from Alex, who's been working with Jo and others, and his background and experience is in digital communications. And we're going to be looking at Twitter there for about 10 minutes or so, leaving a good long chunk of time, for about half an hour or so, for us to have questions and answers. So in a moment, as I say, I'm going to ask Jo and then Alex and then finally Heather to introduce themselves, and then Heather will carry on saying a little bit more about the background. So Jo and then Alex, would you just like to say hello before we hear from you properly later?
Hi, yes, I'm Jo Curtis. My role is in patient engagement, and I work for South Devon and Torbay Clinical Commissioning Group.
All right, thank you, Jo, and we'll hear from you shortly as well. Thanks. Alex.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Alex Talbot. I'm a digital communications consultant who works with many organisations in the NHS on how they can use social media and other digital technologies to keep in touch with all of their stakeholders. And I look forward to hearing all of your questions later today.
Great, thanks, Alex. So we'll hear you after the first Q&A session a bit later on. So Heather, who is a project lead from the Patients Association, do you want to just give us a brief explanation about the context, if you like, of this web seminar and the need for it as well?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Eardley, Development Director for the Patients Association. I've been leading the Patient Participation Group Development Project across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, which was set up last June, and we had funding for a year from NHS England. And since that time, we've made contact with all the 230 practices across the Devon and Cornwall, and we've ran some workshops earlier in the year, and we were really trying to find out what the issues were, what help people needed in terms of developing their PPGs and really taking things forward. And one of the things that came up was about virtual groups and the use of social media and a training need around using social media. And people were keen to do it, but were a bit nervous about how to go about it and how to use it. So we've decided to put on this webinar today, which I'm really excited about, and really very grateful to Martin, Alex and Jo for taking part in it, and hopefully everyone will get a lot from it. So if there's any questions about the project, or if any of you from out of the area are interested in what we're doing, please make contact with me. But that's all I want to say at the moment, I think, and just hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Heather, and we'll have lots of contact details at the end of the web seminar, but also I didn't say that of course we'll be sending out slides and all sorts of contact details afterwards. So we're going to, in a moment, move on to Jo's seminar, Jo's presentation. Jo, I think you're now in control. Can we just check that you are?
Okay, I'll just...
yeah, oh, you need to go up to your top slide. Yeah, thank you. And over to Jo. Thank you, Jo.
So hopefully everybody can see that I'm on the first page of the presentation, Introduction to Facebook and PPGs. So what I'm going to cover is brief introduction, what is Facebook, how it works, what kind of people use it and for what, a bit about public pages and groups, how you might apply that for your PPG, and just something about two-way interaction, which I gather causes some anxiety for some people. So just to start then, Facebook, and I'm starting at the beginning really, because I appreciate that people are at different stages. So it is online, and you can use words, as many of you like, photos and other images, so that's how it differs to Twitter. You can share albums, photo albums. It's where you can ask for people's opinion on things and also give your own. And that's an important issue, I think, for if you're thinking about how to use it as a PPG or a practice. And you can with Facebook, limit your interactions to the people that you choose, subject to their permission, or you can interact on a totally public basis. And you can also use it to send messages privately to either individuals or groups. So just a few of the key words here that I've emboldened on this page. If you're an individual, you become friends with somebody, or you'll like a page, and that means that their information will appear routinely on your home page. And then when you put information in your status or you update people, that's stored on your profile. And if anybody comments on something that you've written, or they might tag you, you'll get a notification. I'll show you a bit about that shortly. Also, just to bear in mind that if you tag somebody, you're drawing their attention to what you've written or your photo or whatever you've uploaded, but that also means that your friends will be able to see it, and so will their friends. So just a bit really to go through what are people, who's using it and what for. So people use it a lot to keep in touch with their family and friends. It's very informal. People also use it to find out about services and products. And I find that people will like or follow shops or other businesses and use that more as a way to keep in touch with what's going on, latest offers, than they might do to search out somebody's website. Because often they know who they're interacting with, people will be more honest, I find, but in a public forum that may be different. And I would say that from my personal experience, most people that I know tend to use Facebook on a daily basis, but they might also have supplementary accounts with Twitter or Instagram or other channels. I also find that people tend to interact on community forums like spotted pages or places where people are selling things, and they ask questions to find out information and hope that people will be able to help them out. And that's increasingly, I'm finding, another way that people are finding their information out. So they're doing that rather than go to a website or Google. So I mentioned that these public pages and groups.
Okay. Okay, fine. You get through. Otherwise, my computer's got Chrome.
Oh, sorry. I think we just
the Java aspect.
Having an interruption. So I mentioned public pages and groups, and in our area, and these vary depending on who set what up in which area. We've got in our area Spotted Torquay, Spotted Brixham, Spotted Newton Abbot. We've got a Teignmouth Oracle, Eyes of Dawlish, Loving Totnes. And those are very geographical ones, and that's where people tend to put all of the information about their town, what's going on. They have tens of thousands of followers, so if you're commenting on that, that's a lot of people might see that. Or it might be topic-based, so like Transition Town, Walking for Health, or the Buy, Swap, Sell type sites. If you're relating this back to your PPG, you'll have a page or a group, and I'll explain a little bit in a minute. What we've done is, because you have to associate that with a person, and because we're an organisation, we've made an administrative account, and then have had pages coming off that, and I'll show you a bit about that in a second. But you also make sure your information is clear, that you're providing on your profile, and those kind of pages, those groups, those community pages that I mentioned, see what's around in your area and see how you can interact with them and share their information, but also encourage them to share your information. And be prepared to, or be open to using your page for finding information out rather than just putting messages out. An example of that recently, I was having a discussion with somebody about from a practice about how, it's a really good mechanism to tell people how many wasted appointments there are when people don't turn up. And I just mentioned in doing that, it might be worth asking people, not just putting that information up there, but asking them, what is it that means that you miss your appointment, or do you forget, or is there another thing? And that might help you in planning things in the surgery or planning the systems that you're working around. Okay, at this point, I'm going to share my screen, if you bear with me. Okay, so you should be able to see our page at the moment and my mouse that's traveling around. And I mentioned that we have a central administrative account, and that's this SDT-CCG. That's our person that we've made a Facebook profile for. And we've shared the login details for that with our core team here at the CCG. So you might be able to do that with your administrators at the practice or the number of people in the PPG. So what we've done is we've made these pages. So we've got 5 localities in our CCG. So we've given each locality a page that we can then interact from that. So I'm going to go to our coastal locality. We've recently held a consultation, and this was provided a really useful way of interacting with people. Just to mention, really, I mentioned notifications. So this is where you'll see the notification, and it brings up all of the notifications that we've had, and where people have commented on our status or liked our posts or what have you. So if I'll click that, that's the most recent one, and that's the post that I individually liked earlier. So if I go back to the profile of that page, the coastal page, and it just shows you that's where people would send messages to, or you might get friend requests or people liking the page through there. So, and then what I mentioned also about our profile. So this is, I'll scroll down so you can see the information on the page there. And there's a kind of the history of what we've posted. And if I go to home, that shows the information from all of the organisations and people that we follow. So that enables us to keep in touch with what's going on as well. I think that was all I was going to show you about that. So I will stop sharing and go back to my presentation, which then takes me on to the example of being interactive with people and also interacting on community pages. So this is an example of where through our consultation, it was about community services and it related to 2 hospitals, and there was a lot of discussion in the local community about from different people with different agendas. So there was a lot of information where people were saying the hospital was closing down, which actually wasn't the point of the consultation. So we were able to put that on our Facebook page. This is what you can see now. And also, and you can see that that was shared a couple of times. And then there was a bit of discussion. I'll go on to the next slide, which is not responding on my bit. Oops. For some reason, it's not coming up. But but basically, that was shared by Teignmouth Oracle, and that meant that, and then people had a really interesting comment on that. Discussion about people saying, well, yes, I think the hospitals still are closing down, or I agree that there's not enough money in the public purse, so we have to be rational with these hospitals. And then we were able also to just join in with that discussion and say, if you want to find out the information about the consultation, please follow the link to this website, and Healthwatch Devon are facilitating that for us. So that gave us the opportunity to do that. Just to mention, our Facebook page, and particularly the coastal locality, that does have some, oh, there it is, it's appeared now. It does have the most likes or follows from our Facebook pages. It's got about 60, which actually is nothing. And even though we've had that recent consultation and people were talking about it, we still only have 60 likes. And people have commented on that as well. And so, but I think what we are able to do is have a presence on these community sites and have the discussion in those forums as well. So I'm going to finish my presentation now. I'm aware that I've run over by a minute, and invite any questions. I'll hand over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Jo. So we've got about 10 minutes for questions, either in person, as it were, by phone, by raising your hand, and I'll take those in order, or if you'd like to send the question in the chat box, and it'd be great if you did that to everybody. Then we can share the question, and I can read it out, or we can, or Jo can. So I'm scanning for any questions from Jo's presentation. The second presentation from Alex will be covering the other popular social media medium, which is Twitter. So Jo's concentrating on Facebook here, and then in the final Q&A, which is quite a good length of time, we can talk about all sorts of issues relating to your own practices. But it's time now for questions, if you would like to pose any from anybody. Any questions out there? Jo and I are listening patiently. Ellie, thank you, Ellie. So I'm going to, in a moment, I think that's Ellie, you're the only person at the moment. And also we've got a question now in the chat box. I'm going to ask Ellie first of all. I'm just going to take you off mute, Ellie, and so you are free to talk to all of us. And Jo, and what was your question?
Well, I just actually Sarah's just said something on chat as well about negative comments. Now, obviously, I work in a GP practice, so it's completely different from an organisation such as the CCG, and your posts are going to be slightly different. It's more a question about the negative comments. I think my GPs, I really want to get us onto Facebook because I think it's a great way of promoting things in practice. But all of my GPs were adamant that there would be a lot of trolls, there'd be lots of negative comments. How could we come back from that? And I just wanted to know what if you have any advice or anything.
Can we that'd be great if we had a response from Jo, and then I'm going to also have that as a bigger question for everybody to chip into in a longer discussion, because I think it'll be very relevant to a lot of people, Ellie. So just hear from Jo, and then I'll say we'll hold it on, carry it over to the Q&A later on as well, I think.
Okay.
Jo.
Okay, there's a few things really. I was really lucky that I did have colleagues to support me when I was interacting, or if I felt that anything, I was getting out of my depth, because particularly in a consultation, there's a lot of political discussion, and that's not my area of expertise. So I did have that support, which was great. And I would say to any practices in my area that I'd be equally happy to support anyone who was feeling anxious or concerned about that, or struggling with a particular discussion or what have you. I find that, and actually, I was probably more anxious about starting those kind of things beforehand. But as I interacted with people more, I found that it felt more comfortable. And if I just took the approach that we're just playing it factually, we're not giving any opinion or judgment. And if people want to give opinion or judgment to me, or our organisation, that's fine. That's it's a public forum, but just be absolutely honest. This is our position. We feel very confident in our position, and and these are the facts, and just keep it to that level where possible. And if people, it's just like responding to a complaint, I guess. If people feel particularly narked about something, I'd be always say, I'm really sorry that you feel like that. And actually, if this is something that's causing a number of people some grief, why don't we have a discussion about it in the PPG? This is how you can get involved. And just turn it into something a bit more proactive and positive, that if people are going to whinge, then they can do something about it with you, rather than doing it from the sidelines. But really, just to reiterate that if anybody, particularly in our area, would like any support when you're facing that, then I'm quite happy to offer it. And I'm sure my CCG colleagues in other areas would be able to do the same.
Okay, thank you, Jo. And I say that's a topic clearly, I think, which other people are interested in. Just see who in chat box has also said that. One of our other Hannah, I think you're touching the same sort of area as well, and Sarah, dealing with negative comments. So let's pick that up as a slightly bigger issue, I think, of interest to many of you in the longer question and answers at the end. Ray has had to leave us, as you can see from the chat box, but has left what he says is a blatant advert. I don't mind that at all.
Sorry, Martin. Can I just? I've just noticed what Caroline was writing about NHS choices, and actually that we use patient opinion, which it has the same information on it. And I find that people, you can really see the way people respond, or organisations respond to comments, is really helpful. If you just kind of do a cut and paste, really sorry you felt like this, contact our PAL service. That doesn't have as much impact as if you say, oh, I really recognise that that's something you struggled with, and reference back what they were talking about and say, well, this is what we'd like to do about it, or this is what should happen. Or I think those kind of responses, those honest ones, often are received much more helpfully.
Well, that's really helpful, Joe, and Caroline, your comments as well. We're going to keep the chat box. Obviously, I'll edit out anything about the weather, but I can send you a copy of the script, if you like, of our chat box as well afterwards. I just want to conclude that question, and perhaps allow time for one more to Joe, by sharing something with you, and it's just coming our way now. Just a moment. Yes, there it is. So in front of you, you should now be able to see the Birmingham Children's Hospital totally public website, where they have taken, some might say a brave step, I'd say a very honest step, to have all feedback live that parents, presumably mostly, are giving them that day today. So you can see in front of you, you can see a great compliment. But also, as you scroll, you look further down the screen, you can see a reply from somebody who texted on Monday, 11th of May, and a reply, which was a thank you. But I think if you look at this in more detail, as I have several times myself, you'll see replies to the critical comments as well. Wi-Fi service absolutely terrible. That's a big comment. They haven't censored that. So that's an interesting example of an organisation being prepared to respond to any comment rather than just the ones that are more attractive to hear. I'm going to stop there, but we did have just one other area, perhaps, Joe, you could address, which was about just from Debbie, saying, do you find it quite time-consuming? How about from your viewpoint, Joe? Do you find it quite time-consuming?
It can be, and certainly while we were in the consultation process, we needed to keep an eye on it all the time, and we were doing it evenings and weekends as well. But that's through a consultation process, and I think for practices, people are realistic to think that you're open during those certain hours, and if you don't respond immediately, then you're obviously busy. So I tend to, when we haven't got anything particular going on, I would check in specifically once a day, and just check there aren't any messages outstanding or comments or anything like that. I've got I had a phone or an iPad, and it alerts me when there's a new notification. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to respond to that as part of my job. So, it's how you factor it into your routine, really, and whose responsibility in the practice or the PPG you allocate that. But I think we should be really clear on and agree between yourselves how much time you're willing or able to spend on it, and keep to that, because you don't want to put extra pressure on yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you. There will be more questions for you, I'm sure, later on as people reflect on that. But in a moment, I'm going to pass on to Alex, who's going to, describe some of the ways of using and the advantages and the simple technicalities of using Twitter. And I'm going to pass over to you, Alex. Are you ready to describe?
Excellent.
Twitter?
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you, Joe. That was spot on. So yeah, please keep the questions coming and the chat coming in the chat box. I don't mind people sort of carrying on there and listening to me in the background. Hopefully you can all see my first slide here, and we'll quickly move on to the second slide, which is what we'll cover. This will cover specifically Twitter, and some of the things here are Twitter specific, but other bits do lend themselves to other social networks as well. So moving on to what Twitter is. It's known as a micro-blogging platform. Now, that just means that the amount of text you can share on this particular social network is reduced, and in this case to 140 character limit. So it's 140 characters with spaces, full stops, etc. Twitter is very good at removing the geographical and hierarchical boundaries within society. The most obvious example for us today is I'm sat in the Austrian Alps and speaking to you guys all over the country. That's a webinar technology doing that. Twitter does that too. And I can speak to the CEO, or the CEO can speak to the porter. And none of these profiles are blocked from speaking to other profiles, which is a bit different from Facebook. We have to friend people first to speak to their personal profiles. People on Twitter share everything. Some people will just observe, others will share what they've had for breakfast, and a lot of people share a lot more useful things than that. So please don't go on to Twitter thinking that it's just full of inane comments. As I'll show in a minute, there are some really useful communities out there. Twitter tends to bring communities of interest together, and we'll look at hashtags in a minute and how they help bring people with similar interests and jobs together to talk about how they can get better at what they're doing. So who's using it? And this is taken from the Ofcom Consumer Research Report, which they release every year. This isn't Twitter specific. This is social networking sites at home. So that's things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Tumblr, etc. And as you can see, as a general rule here, the younger you are and the richer you are, or the higher up the socio-demographic scale you are, the more likely you are to use social networking sites. So I find that very interesting from an NHS perspective, because the NHS tends to treat older, poorer people more than younger, rich people. So social networking is definitely not a silver bullet, but it does give access to those who are traditionally harder to reach with the church hall outreach of some of the more traditional PPG channels, which perhaps you've used in the past. So how does it work? At this stage, I will flip to sharing my screen and show you guys how it works. So hopefully now you can all see this on my screen, my mouse here moving around. This is Twitter. You can see up here, twitter.com. And this is me signed in. So there's a profile and settings, etc. So this is me having signed into my Twitter account, but you could see something a bit like this without even having to sign into Twitter. To take you through this, we have the home feed here down the middle. And the things which turn up here are all of the tweets from people that I follow. So when I follow a profile and they tweet, it will turn up in this central feed here. And as you can see, the number of new tweets keeps ticking over. So there's a lot of information going through, but don't feel pressured to have to always read it. You can just not read 90%, 99%, and just dip in and out. And we'll look at things, how you sort of filter out some of the noise in a second with hashtags. Now, the people I'm following, I follow 1,200 nearly and have 1,700 followers. These numbers, don't worry about them. Don't chase them. If you decide to have a Twitter account, already have them. It's more about who these people are. It's not about the number. You can see on my profile, you have my profile picture, my name, and my handle, or username as it's sometimes referred to here, which starts with an @ sign. So everything on Twitter, which is a username, starts with an @ sign, and you can see it here. We have notifications up here. This is notifications to me to say you have a new tweet, somebody said something. So Old School Surgery, thanks very much. And we see here that Old School Surgery has the name of that. It doesn't have to be a person's name. And thank you, Martin, as well. Martin's very helpfully included a couple of hashtags and some other usernames here. So how we navigate around this, we can click on to Patient Voice South's profile, and we suddenly therefore see a quick bio here, which describes what the profile is about, a useful URL link to a website, and then we can see their tweets as well, and I can decide to follow. So I click follow, and now I'm following. And that means that when we go back to that very first page that we were on, when Patient Voice South tweets, I will see that in this middle section here. If we go back to our notifications and have a little look, we've had some interaction with that already. Jo has retweeted, which means that she's forwarded that tweet onto her followers. So, for example, the people who follow Patient Voice South may not be the same people who follow Jo, and that's how information gets spread across a network. And if we click onto this hashtag, a hashtag is just the hash sign and then a string of letters. It doesn't need to be a word. It doesn't need to be like patient engagement there. It can be very short. This hashtag stands for NHS social media. And if we click on that, what that means is that we get all tweets on Twitter which have NHSSM within them, the hashtag. So we see here the results for NHSSM, and we get the tweets through here, including Patient Voice South. Will Barker has summed up last night's NHSSM chat in something called a Storify, and so on and so forth. A quick point of note, search terms on Twitter and hashtags on Twitter will always give you top tweets. To get all within chronological order, you click on all, and then you'll see that things will just turn up as a string of tweets. Okay, we've done hashtags there. Please ask questions if it's not clear. We'll go on to chats and Twitter chats you may have heard of. This is where people use hashtags, again, in this case NHSSM, to talk to each other. Now, the profiles which are talking don't necessarily need to follow each other, but what you achieve here is that you can ask a question, so what difference is your digital output making, for example, here, and then you can gain answers. Now, this is in chronological order, the latest or the newest at the top, so we scroll up, and we get some answers to the questions and some chat. So you see that Will and Sophie are talking to each other. Will has mentioned Sophie at SophieSW14, and then Sophie has mentioned Will.Barker and agreed with his point here. So that's how a chat works. To do that, you just need a hashtag. And how do you make a hashtag? Well, you can make any up. Doesn't really matter. But if we thought, okay, we want to use PPG chat as a hashtag, let's see, very importantly, whether it's clean, whether it's being used for anything else, whether it's being used for information that isn't really in line with the values that you may have for PPG chat. And we see here that it's pretty clean. I mean, there's only 2 tweets in the history of Twitter that we can see here, one in 2013, one at the beginning of 2014. So if any of you wanted to start up a hashtag, for example, a hashtag where PPG chairs and members talk to each other about how to use PPG forums better, then PPG chat could be a really nice hashtag. Okay, so we've gone through hashtags, we've gone through Twitter chats and how Twitter works a little bit. Very, very quick, I understand this is super speed, so do ask questions. But who can see what on Twitter? Now, if I stop sharing and go back to my slides, we'll just shoot through some of these. So these slides you'll get, it just has some nice arrows and pointers and what I said in text, so you can revise for it. So let's have a look. Who can see what on Twitter? A really good assumption here is everybody can see anything on Twitter. So Twitter is based on being open and public. I don't need to be signed up to Twitter to see anything on Twitter. I can just go on as an anonymous member of the public, browse to twitter.com and then find things there. But there is an option called a direct message, which is like an email, but only 160 characters in that case. But do remember that, as with any social media networks, it only takes a screen share to then share these bits of text or pictures publicly. So it's best just to remain very cautious and only say what you'd say on a bus or in the canteen or in the lift at work. It's a nice little rule to take with you when you're using social media. How do you find people? Well, as you saw on the very brief screen share there, if you use a hashtag, you suddenly are brought up, if you follow that hashtag link, you're brought to lots of different profiles. So you may have found through NHSM, the NHSM account, the Will.Barker account, the Sarah account that was there, and you can go and find these people, and they're based on a community of interest. You can search by subject, keywords, name, and the organisation as well. And it is all around this communities of interest. I'll keep repeating that because Twitter does bring together people with similar interests. It's very good for that. And you can also go and see who the people you follow as a guide for who might be useful to view. A point of note here that Jo and I have spoken about in the past, and she mentioned with the number of likes, it takes a long time to build a big network. And from my professional perspective, it shouldn't be all about numbers of likes and numbers of shares. It should be about who you're talking to and whether you would have been talking to them in a different way if you weren't using social media. And I think that's a very nice starting point for thinking about how and why you should use social media from a PPG perspective. So finally, where can you find out more about this? It's been a very quick run through. I will share my screen once more and just show you guys where you can get some really, really helpful bits of help from Twitter and Facebook. So if you look here, I've gone to support.twitter.com, and this is the sort of starting point for learning about Twitter if you know very little about it, and also a very, very good place to refresh your knowledge if you've used it personally but are starting to use it professionally, for example. And you can find out all sorts of bits through the welcome. I have already opened on these tabs, for example, using hashtags on Twitter. So that's based under the basics section, a good description there. And also some about finding people on Twitter, how you can do that. So if you navigate to support.twitter.com in your browser, you can go through all of this. There's things about how protected your tweets are, how public your tweets are, what is a retweet, what's a reply, what's a mention, what does following mean, etc. So this is a really good place for you to learn and get the information from the absolute experts. Similarly, Facebook offers the same. And for you guys, I'll point out 3 areas in particular for PPGs. You've got your privacy menu here, so controlling who can find you, accessing data, minors, so children in this instance, and privacy policy, things like that. Then you've got your security, that's using working out what to do with your password if you think your account's been hacked, things like that. Some really good tips here around strong passwords, making sure that you log out, that you have up-to-date software, etc. And then finally, the last menu I'll highlight here is Pages. This is Facebook help on Pages, and this is extremely detailed. And as Jo said, as a PPG, you can have a page. You can't really have a personal profile. Facebook wants a personal profile to be the admin of a page, and that's under managing a page here. And you can click getting started, and then how do I create a page? Who can create a page, etc. There's really detailed step-by-step guides through here, and this is extremely helpful. So I'm aware, obviously, we only have a very short amount of time today. Okay, I'll stop talking in one sec. I'll just show you 2 more slides that you'll get when Martin sends these through. You've got any other business bits here, some good hashtags and decent Twitter accounts to start following. A really useful social media toolkit done by NHS employers, as written by myself, around setting your objectives, your timelines, and internal expectations for your work on social media in general, and that's very applicable to, I think, many of the practices and PPG groups out there at the moment. And then finally, another reminder about the strength of passwords and security, keeping things up to date, because that just keeps away any problems of accounts going awry. Okay, I'll hand over back to you, Martin, and we'll go into the Q&A session. Thank you very much for your time and listening to me.
Thank you very much, Alex. We're going to broaden up the Q&A, which is for another, we've got about 25 minutes if we need it. No, we might well do. Let's take some questions perhaps for Alex first, if they are specifically for Alex around Twitter. And then, of course, I'll bring Joe in and Heather as well to answer questions which might benefit from both people. But I've got a question coming up in the chat box. You can see those as well, Alex. Can you have two people running one account? And there's a question from Debbie there, which perhaps you could clarify as well. Alex?
Yeah. You can have two people running one Twitter account. What that requires is the sharing of the login information. So when you log into Twitter, you'll have your username, your @such and such, and your passwords. And if you share that with a second person, they can sign in on their web browser or their mobile phone, for example. And then you can have two people running one account. So clearly there are some logistical implications of that, making sure that two people aren't trying to answer the same tweet at the same time with perhaps different messages, and just making sure that you have perhaps shifts where you run them. But other than that, yeah, that's how you would do it.
Good, thank you, Alex. And can you see Debbie's question as well in the chat box?
Yeah, let me just catch up. Okay, so Debbie, yes and no in some respects. I'll go back to the screen shares because it's a lot easier to see it as well as I speak.
Debbie's question is, do you need the username and the hashtag to chat with somebody?
Yeah. So here, I could chat with Old School Surgery if I click reply.
By the way.
And I could say, for example, thank you, good to meet you, and a smiley face, whatever not. And that there is me just talking to Old School Surgery. I click tweet, and that tweet's now sent. You see there, Old School Surgery there, and my tweet here. Now, that didn't require a hashtag, but if we were part of a tweet chat, which is using a hashtag so many people can get together around one topic, then you would need to have included that hashtag to make sure the hashtag went into the chat. But please follow up on that question if I'm not clear enough to you there.
Right. Okay, thank you, Alex. So the hashtag is a topic, not a person, I think is another way of clarifying.
Yes, that's a great description, Martin. Thanks.
Thank you. And Lucy's asking us another useful technical question. Connecting Facebook and Twitter, would you recommend it? And is it possible?
Okay, so Lucy, to sort of confirm your question, is that where if you post something on Facebook, it will be posted to Twitter automatically? I just put a Y in the chat box. Cool. Okay. I disagree with that personally and professionally, I should say, because Twitter has that character limit. So we're talking about connecting Facebook posts to Twitter instead of Twitter posts to Facebook. So if you have a post on Facebook, it's likely to go over 140 characters. It turns up on Twitter and you can't read all of it, and it just redirects you to Facebook. And it's not a very platform inclusive way of distributing information. If you're going to have Facebook and Twitter, it's best to have content which matches those two platforms' strengths. So Facebook is really strong at sharing longer information, albums of pictures, for example, photos, and connecting people on a very much more personal level sometimes, whereas Twitter is very short, sharp, good at sharing useful ideas, kind of a brainstorming approach, if you like, where people are really snappy, throwing in their opinion and creating personal networks to use at work. So Twitter content should be shorter and more to the point, whereas Facebook can be a bit more personalized, fluffier, if you like. So I personally don't agree with it, because when you see an NHS organisation's Twitter feed, which is full of Facebook link, Facebook link, it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very professional, I don't think.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I'm going to, I brought Jo in on the line, and obviously if people want a response from Heather, I can also ask her. But this is very much the time for everybody's questions, but I've got one which I think perhaps wraps up some of the things a couple of people have been saying. So this is really for Jo and Alex and for everybody else on in the seminar as well. And that's about persuading, because I'm getting a sense that persuading, if you're a practice manager or if you're a PPG, persuading the practice or the GPs or to see the advantage or to overcome the fears, which is one of the things that's come up in the earlier part of the discussion around control. That's a question. Any advice from Jo and Alex? But I think, you know, we've got 20 people here in the room. Is there anybody who would like to chip in and say, well, I have managed to persuade a trial or a full-blown Twitter or Facebook account in my practice? So whilst you're thinking about that, I'll ask see if Jo's got any response if you've heard the positive arguments, and then see if anybody else wants to chip in.
I don't know if I have heard the positive arguments actually. I think if there's a chance of showing examples of where it's worked well, where people have got interesting information back, as well as just, you know, sort of putting information out at people. And also, I mean, I would still say, you know, those community connections are really important. So if it does enable you to join in with discussions elsewhere or encourage people into your discussion, I think that's just a different angle, and being able to demonstrate that to some anxious people might be helpful. And I'd be really interested to hear from anybody in the room, you know, if you've got any examples of where that's been successful.
Okay, thank you, Jo. Well, I'm going to ask Vicky. I'm sure you're willing to do that. Vicky in Plymouth, and I'm wondering, Vicky, because you've put something in the chat box to us. You've got a Facebook account. Did you need to persuade anybody, or how much did you need to persuade to do that?
Within our surgery?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they were all happy because we share lots of educational things that are going on, about some clinics, about the staffing. So everybody was quite welcoming in the surgery to have a Facebook account, and we've also linked it to the community, the patients in the community as well. So we get to know what's going on in the community.
So the patients in the community is another Facebook account,
yes,
is it,
yes,
or a community group
yeah.
or something? It's a local
yes,
one.
Yes, a community group, yes.
Yes, yeah. And do you cover the whole of Plymouth? Or, sorry, you're a surgery, aren't you? Not a...
Yes, surgery.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
We've got 4 surgeries, so
yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So no persuading really needed there from what you're saying in your case?
No, they were all really happy to have something that we can correspond with the patients.
Yes, yeah. And to what extent do you think it's, just putting you on the spot here, Vicky, but that it's been two-way? In other words, it's a little more than telling people about flu jabs. Have you developed it that way?
To be honest, we haven't sort of gone, where patients can make comments and leave comments, but I think we're going to amend the Facebook account so that would happen, so we can do some research, because I think that's a really great way to find out what the patients really want.
Yes,
yeah. I think we'll do that more on our patient participation Facebook account.
Oh, you've got one of those as well?
No, not yet, because it's quite a new group, so
yeah.
My plans are set up.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it's great to hear real examples of people actually trying it rather than just the theory as well.
It's time-consuming. I must admit, it is very time-consuming. And make sure the data's up to date and the information's up to date.
So if it's you or a perhaps an assistant practice manager or somebody, how would you be able to give hours per week, or how would you?
I've got a couple of my admin support staff
Yeah.
involved now as well. Yeah.
And would you say it was, how many hours a week on
yeah,
average?
I would say,
Is that hard possible to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go onto it and probably about an hour a week, yeah, from myself.
And that's the Facebook one, yeah.
It could be a full-time job for somebody.
Well,
they really wanted to go to town.
but it's not going to be for any of you, I don't
No.
think. You're going to put it in perspective, aren't you?
Yeah.
Thanks then, Vicky. I'm just going to also ask anybody else would like to offer their experience of moving from not having Facebook or Twitter to having one. Do you want to raise your hand or put something in the chat box? Because it does seem to me that this important aspect of persuading people of the advantages is part of the journey, if you like. Caroline, great. Everybody can read that, I'm sure, in the chat box. Caroline, I'm just reading it myself. Thank you. So you've got, not saying that's the one thing you've said, Caroline, and I will ask you to speak if you don't mind in a moment, but one feature of your practice is that you've got a lively student population, and I in fact know that you're in the centre of Bristol, aren't you? So Caroline, I'm just going to find your, yes, there we are. I'm just going to take you off mute if that's okay, Caroline. Welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Do you want to say anything more, or does anybody perhaps want to ask you a question about how it's worked? You've clearly used it dynamically, if that's the right word.
Well, it's been interesting for people to be able to see how we've expanded rather than just being a surgery which, people have joined, one or two at a time. We've had to go out and actually market the practice and get all our patients from all different situations and lifestyles that our practice area covers, really. But the students, especially, we have a lot of foreign students that come over. And this is one way that we can reach all of them.
And do you have any two-way exchange that you notice?
Yeah, we have quite a few comments on there. It usually goes in fits and starts, especially when it's freshers. That's when we have a real hit on the Facebook page. And we did, for the first few years, we did a lot of marketing around freshers, but we'd pick up a lot of patients. But the practice has grown so much now that we don't really need to market it as that.
But it was part of your marketing approach, going from 0 patients originally.
And it's interesting for patients to see, the progress of the building work. We're waiting for another expansion now, and obviously that will all go on there as well. And there's 2 of us that manage this Facebook page. We've let it go for a while, but we're intending to use it a lot more now. And I'm sort of in my 50s, and so I've got one approach to it. And Callie, who is our healthcare assistant, who's going to do a lot more of this as well, she's in her 20s, so we'll get, a combined approach, really.
Yeah, and she'll be sitting there in the cafe tweeting for work, probably. Yeah. We've got a question here coming up from Debbie to you, and we'll come back to a question also from Amanda, who clearly is in a PPG group. Question from Debbie is to you, Caroline. Do you have a PPG actively, and do you have a page if you do?
Yes, we have a PPG. We've got a virtual group of about 50 people. And then we've got a patient forum, which actually we meet every quarter, which has only got about 6 or 7 people on it. What we find is that the virtual group is a lot of, they're very young, they're sort of 20s to 30s, and a lot of nationalities on that. And they don't contribute a great deal to it. We tend to find that the 6 or so that we've got on our patient forum, they're useful to refer to for lots of things that are going on in-house, but they tend to be quite a lot older. So we find that the virtual group, although they will probably be on Facebook and see what we're doing there, they don't communicate in a way that we would like them to, really. So we'd be very interested to hear of ways that we can communicate with them more, or get a response from them, because they tend to come to us when they're unwell, but when they're well they don't really seem to want to bother. I think it's the practice that we have, because it's such a diverse community down here in Broadmead.
Well, thank you, Caroline. And we've got a quote. I'll just keep you on the line just for 1 second. Lucy Roberts, who's from Old School Surgery, which is in Bristol, but also, as you can see in the chat box, Lucy Surgery runs a student health service.
Oh, right, yeah.
And you can see there from the chat box that they've decided to set up a Twitter account, which again, I think links into Alex's slide about the demographics of who is most likely to be using Twitter. So, and also there's a request there. Can you see, Caroline, for to talk to Lucy?
Talk to Lucy, and Callie, is very keen to use Twitter as well. So we're going to start that as a result of this seminar.
Good, okay, thank you. And we're going to, one thing I will say again at the end, but with your permission, we will send out the attendance list with email addresses. Let me know if you don't want that. And that means you can communicate outside of today's seminar, which is half of the point. I'm just going to put you on mute again, Caroline, but thank you very much. Thank you. And we've got a question or a point from Amanda, and Amanda Rutter, and you're in Chagford on Dartmoor, and a PPG member. And I just wondered if, Amanda, I could ask you to speak, because if I can find your name on my list, because you are particularly from a PPG, and I think that's going to be especially interesting because so far a lot of the chat has been from practice staff or practice members. So Amanda, you're there online. Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you, Amanda. So you're saying in your note in the chat box that you might be discussing this at your next PPG meeting. How do you think it'll go down? Do you think you'll have to be persuasive, or?
I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that either of the, well, there are 3 GPs now. One young one has recently joined as a partner. I'm not sure that the 2 main GPs would really be that interested. Having said that, it is something we will discuss at our next PPG meeting, which is in June, and the practice manager always attends, so we can get a lot of information from her and as to whether she thinks that the GPs would go for it. I certainly don't think they'd go for Twitter, but I would hold out for Facebook, but we'll see.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, Amanda, because we've been talking, haven't we, so far, and we've had some really useful information from Joe and Alex about the how it works and how you make it work. What we perhaps could spend the next 5 minutes talking about, in the whole seminar, is some of the persuasive reasons to overcome the fears. And just off the top of your head, Amanda, would there be something that comes to your mind that says,
I think
despite the problems, it's worth it? What do you think?
It's trying to persuade the 2 particular GPs I'm thinking of. It is a very small practice. We barely have 3,000 patients. It's very rural. And the 2 GPs I'm talking about, as I say, the 3rd GP, who's much younger, she only joined just over a month ago because one GP wanted to step down, do fewer surgeries. And whereas the younger one, I think, might be interested. We might actually be depending upon her to try and persuade the others. The other 2 aren't even particularly happy that there's a PPG.
So this might be another step further.
Yes. So it might be a step too far. But we'll see.
Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Martin, can I throw in just something? Could you give me control of the screen for a moment?
Yeah, of course I can. And also, Alex is going to chip in a moment. Just one moment, Joe. So it's a great list of people here. I have to find your name first. Hold on a minute. Oh, Alex, I think already is the presenter of the screen.
Alex, can you give
me
control?
It's all right, I'll do it. Don't worry.
I'll move it over.
We're talking.
Okay, I've got it.
You got it. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to show you this. I mentioned in my presentation about pages and groups, and this is Ashburton surgery patients who have a group, and it's not visible to anybody unless they're a member. You can find out who the members are, and I know that one of the members is a practice manager and the locality manager of that area, So that could be, and that's run by the patient. So and that's another option, and I would absolutely think it was acceptable for the practice to be linked in with that. But then the positive is that it takes the burden of administration away from the practice. But then, and also with that, some control if that's something that you're anxious about. But the benefit, I think, is that you get really great patient-led discussion about issues that are important to patients, and by having those connections with the practice that where you can all see and join in, then then you get to hear things that you might not necessarily if you're throwing out a question or a point or a message every so often. So I'm going to give you back to can you take the control back, Martin?
Yeah,
but I just
thank
wanted
you.
to share that as another option for discussion.
Thank you. And Alex, you had your hand up yourself earlier on. Did you want to chip in on any experience you've come across on arguments against the caution?
I think we have to just maybe step back right to the beginning of this webinar and ask, why are we talking about this particular method of communication? And I think the answer to that is because so many people tend to be using it these days. There is a bit of hype, and if we try and strip that hype away and look at it from a more strategic direction to avoid wasting resources, you have to ask the question, what challenge are we trying to overcome in using these technologies? And if you can't put that down into a couple of sentences, I think you need to go back and think again. Why are you using these things? If you're using these things because your PPG is made up of many people who are in work, it's hard to get to your locality because you're in a rural setting, for example, then you have a starting block for why you're using it. And you can go back to that aim, that reason, when you have started using it to sort of query, are we using this in the right way, or are we getting distracted by the shiny nature of the new technology? And I think that's a really nice place to start for people who haven't already got their accounts set up, is to ask that why question, and then that gives you, for example, Amanda, that discussion with the two GPs. If you don't go in there and say, I want to use social media, but to describe, I think social media could help us interact with some of our more isolated patients on the moors, and this would bring into the value of X into the surgery. That might be a different discussion. So it's having that thinking process and not jumping just because everybody else has jumped. And I think you'll get around a lot of the initial negativity in that manner. That's my experience anyway.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. And you can see in the chat box that Lucy has put a very positive, thank you, Lucy, very positive comment about her granddad, who's 101 and enjoys Twitter and Facebook. So despite Alex's, or rather the Office of Statistics about the demographics, there's lots of exceptions. And as Alex said, we can start from first principles of saying, why are we going to use this shiny stuff? What's the point? And I think because today's seminar has been focused or was started up because of our desire to improve patient engagement in general practice, I think that's the point to come back to, as well as recognizing that for practices themselves, there can be real benefits. And just thinking about what Amanda said about some resistance to having a patient participation group in the first place, and I know Heather's project has been working on that. I might bring you in a minute on that, Heather. If you can see the advantages of having a PPG, a participation group, then I think it's likely that the next step will become fairly straightforward, even despite the technicalities of using social media to enhance that. In fact, I'm going to perhaps ask Heather to say something about the spread of PPGs, and then that might give it, in Devon and Cornwall in your project, it might give us a flavour for how that has grown, and then within that, how social media might just become the obvious next part of that before we round up. But Heather, can I just, that was a long question, do you want to some way.
Yes,
Comment on the growth of PPGs in general.
We've been doing a lot of work over the last 9 months, and we're seeing a lot of PPGs really developing now and taking off in lots of new ways, thinking about what the potential is around health promotion, health education. We've got a student pilot that we've just started with Plymouth University nursing students, and we've linked up 25 students to 25 practices, and they started this week. And a lot of the practices, the PPGs, are using the students to help them with their virtual groups and their social media side. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. We've got a conference on the 16th of July at Plymouth University where we're going to have a number of workshops, one of which will be around this topic, and we'll also be having an opportunity to hear back from the students as well. So if anybody wants to come to that, I think Ray's put the contact, the registration details on that.
I'll send them out as well.
And that's an opportunity also to sort of share the learning from the last year on the project. But lots of exciting things going on with PPGs, and I think it almost just feels the beginning. But I think potential social media to really reach out to larger numbers of people is really quite exciting. And also the sort of the links between the virtual groups and the face-to-face. We need to think a bit about that as well. But just, I know we're short of time now, and I'd just like to thank you all for taking part. I think it's been a really good way to actually connect up a lot of people in a short space of time. So I appreciate Alex and Martin and Joe's time to do this. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Heather. And as Heather has said, I think if we are on a journey, and each of you in your own part of the Southwest, in your practice or your PPG, a journey towards greater engagement and participation with people who use our services, then this will just become the next part of that. It'll become not a barrier, but something that's welcomed. And Alex has put some great little bits of useful hints and tips in the chat box, which again, as I say, I will make sure we send out. Yeah, I'm going to capture those and send them out to you. And I just love that final remark, as we say, from Lucy, who says her granddad is 101 and using all this stuff. And by the way, from myself, who's a complete Twitter novice a year ago in my job, I think I've pretty much got the hang of it in 6 months. So there's hope there. So I'm just simply going to round up today in the next couple of minutes. Heather's done a good summary as well, placing today's seminar as part of this wider piece of work, which I think the population wants, and certainly Patients Association have been asked to project lead around developing PPGs. And those of you who are either in Bristol or the Bristol area now, or in Devon and Cornwall, the bit in the middle, Somerset, has done a huge piece of work on developing PPGs over the last 5 years. And I've got some information on that if any of you want it. So not the social media side, but simply on the fact that practices and their patient list can get a lot from working together. So my ending is simply to say, do use our website, Patient Voice South, and the resources from today, both from Alex, Joe and Heather, we'll put up there, and we'll send you a link. The chat box, as I've mentioned. I've recorded today's session. Please let me know if you don't want that to be used, but if you do, if I don't hear from anybody by email, then I'll assume that's okay. And also people who couldn't make it, or your colleagues, will be able to scroll through the slides as well and listen to the presentations. Do set up a tweet chat, or Alex might want to, and we can see how that goes. Those of you who use Twitter, even if you use it outside work, it might help foster some of the ideas that we've been working on today. And as I say on the slide here, our knowledge bank on the website is a good repository for all of the information that we've used today, but other stuff around PPGs as well. So I think that's all I'm going to say. I just want a great big thank you to particularly to Alex and Joe, but also Heather for getting this started. I'll send everything out, or send a link to that on our website, everything that we've had today. And it'd be really helpful if we could have some feedback, because there is a waiting list for people who wanted to join us today. So it'd be great to know if we need to tweak or fine-tune today's seminar. So I'll send you a link for a very quick feedback form on that. So that's a big thank you from me, a thank you and goodbye. I think Heather has had a chance to do that, so I'm just going to finally make sure that Alex and Joe have a chance to say farewell, and then we will end the meeting. Alex and Joe, over to you to finish.
Thanks very much, everyone. Do feel free to contact me on Twitter. You'll have my username there, and if indeed you want to contact me through Martin or Joe or Heather, likewise. If there are any follow-up questions and you contact me, I'll do my absolute best to answer them. No requirement to pay me, absolutely. If it's a simple question about how Twitter works, how to get started, just get in touch, because I love doing this stuff and I love helping people understand the power of these technologies. So feel free, and great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Alex, and last word to Joe.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody for joining us. I hope it's been useful. And as Alex said, I welcome anybody to follow up with me afterwards if you've got any questions or feedback. And also, you know, give me a shout. I don't always have all the answers, but I'm very happy to try and work through some of the issues and try and problem solve together. So just give me a shout.
Thank you, Joe, and the biggest thank you to everybody who's